Greetings and fist bumps. This is the Raised Eyebrow Podcast, a show where we discuss how people just peopling can make it weird to be a person sometimes. But somebody's got to do it. And we are your hosts, Kojo, Mike, and Alex. In this week's episode, we're going to share what is quite possibly the funniest story I've ever read. That's it. So let's get ready. Here we go. Okay, so I just have to set this up a little bit. I found this the other day, and it was quite the ride, and I want to take you guys through it and our listener through this whole thing. And it's also a really fun way to challenge your friend, but we'll get more on that later. So first of all, some great stories on the internet can be found in comment sections for product reviews. So if you go into like Amazon or in Kijiji, some people post product reviews and they're actually very well written. And there's this one that I found that is amazing. It's publicly available knowledge. So the fact that we're reading it here is fine because it's written on an Amazon.com page for a product. And the comment sections are not just hate fuel, but they're actually a great source of information if you can find it. This is also Canadian content too. So we're kind of promoting our own. So I guess to start off, have you guys ever had Haribo sugar-free gummy bears?
No. Never heard of it.
You've never heard of them? Oh, wow. Okay. So this can be like complete. Yeah, Haribo is the brand, and then they're sugar-free gummy bears.
Oh.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Is it for kids or
doesn't
is it
ring a bell?
This guy's an adult, judging by his picture. He has gray hair, so.
Is this a common brand or product?
Yeah. It's more of a European brand, but
okay.
Yeah,
it's cultured clearly.
So now that it's actually good that you don't know what it is because you are going to experience this as he experienced it. Okay. So the title of his review is "Hell Holds No Surprises for Me Anymore," and the author is Jeffrey Lambert. That's his name on the review. Could be his real name, could be his fake name. Either way, he's a really good writer. So here's his review. This is a cautionary tale, and unlike most of the other reviews on this product, this is a true story, and its authenticity can be qualified by a small news item that appeared in the Toronto Star's local section during the month in April in 2013, much to my chagrin. I would consider myself a prudent man, not given to bouts of outspokenness or craving attention, and certainly not one to rock the boat. On any given day, I can be found reading a crime novel on a park bench in the middle of the city, soaking in the opulence of nature while nibbling on my tuna fish sandwiches, and fending off the ferocious gulls and squirrels that threaten to spoil my repose. This is me, law-abiding and introspective, which is why it came as a shock to me to find myself incarcerated because of the devil's confectionery, Satan's sweetmeat, Lucifer's lozenges, the horror that is known as Haribo sugar-free gummy bears. I'll set the scene. It was late winter, early spring in Toronto, and the city had just been digging itself out from a late season snowstorm. I was heading to Pearson International Airport for a red-eye flight to Amsterdam in order to give the Dutch arm of our company some training on new software that had been installed. I'm deliberately being vague to prevent my place of work being linked to any way of the incident that occurred. I had just finished packing, checked my time, and I found I was running late. My flight was at 7:10 p.m., and it was now almost 5 p.m. Cursing softly, I ran out of the car, threw my bags in the trunk, hitting the gas a little harder than usual in my haste to make it to the long-term parking lot as soon as possible. Luckily, traffic was light on the 401, and I made it to the airport in record time, but I knew that my chances of making the flight were still at risk if I didn't use my time wisely. I hadn't eaten anything since lunch, and I was feeling a bit hungry, my stomach rumbling loudly in protestation, which caused me to look around at other travelers rushing past me in the busy terminal. Mortified that my bodily noises might be heard by the others, I briskly checked my watch and decided that I had enough time to grab a quick snack before going through the baggage check and security, and would be getting something more substantial once I was checked in through security. I spotted a vending machine nestled relatively in a low-traffic corner of the terminal and rushed over, already pulling out my credit card and mentally assessing what I had a craving for so as to save time interacting with the machine. My eyes scanned the colorful array of confection, quickly coming to rest on a tantalizing, rainbow-colored bag of gummy bears, with the simple white and red logo, Haribo, emblazoned across the bag, and it appeared to be a slightly tweaked Helvetica rounded font. Now, I'd like to pause here in the story for a moment to underscore the importance of proper choices. I was hungry, and when you're hungry, you should eat food. Food is defined as a nutritious substance that people consume to maintain life. This is what food is. These days, the definition of the word food has been bastardized and the meaning has been broadened to include a variety of any material that can be digested or rather chewed and swallowed without causing death or severe illness. Haribo sugar-free gummy bears are not food. They aren't even from this planet. I imagine their origins being conceived in a boardroom in hell by a top team of their creative pain administrators with senior level demons rubbing their hands together in a ghoulish delight as hell's chief chemist slowly lifts the veil on their new creation. The point here being, I made a very, very, very poor choice. I pushed the button on the vending machine and ejected a brightly colored bag into my awaiting hands. I had always liked gummy bears. They were bright and rather innocuous, and they weren't overly sweet so as to become annoying. Of course, each candy came in the vestige of a rather happy, docile bear, reminiscent of the pictures in one mind's eye hold as the anthropomorphic bears from Yogi to Winnie. The way I figured it, I was taking a bit of a holiday from life, so I should relax my fastidiously regimented daily schedule a little and allow some joy. After all, I was going to Amsterdam come morning with 16 hours to kill before I had to be training Dutch employees. Maybe I would take a trip down the coffee shops at the red light district and really let my hair down. No, I wouldn't do that. I would see the sight of the city from the bus and as I go to the hotel where I would eat at the hotel restaurant and drinking sparkling water. So I'd better enjoy these gummy bears, my one extravagance to commemorate my break from routine. I joined the queue in the KLM line, which was mercifully short, most likely because all the passengers of my flight had already been checked in, as the flight was scheduled to depart in an hour. I checked my watch again, frowned, absently minded, opened the bag of Haribo sugar-free gummy bears, and began to munch on them as the line slowly advanced. To be fair, they tasted fine, just like any other manufacturer's brand of the colorful candy, and they were sugar-free to boot. This is what made my whole incident that followed so baffling. If they tasted off or different, I would most likely wouldn't have continued to shovel them into my mouth so absentmindedly, while daydreaming about whatever I would order and eat from room service in my hotel in Amsterdam. As I gave the attendant my e-ticket and she weighed my bags, the first of the pains in my stomach began, and I thought nothing of it first, chalking it up to the fact that I needed something more substantial than gummy worms to tackle my hunger. But over the next 5 minutes, the shooting pain became more rapid succession. And at this point, my boarding pass was printed. I had my boarding pass printed and rubbing my stomach a little. I proceeded to security, briefly entertained the thought of trying to find a restroom before going through security. But at that point, my discomfort was manageable, and I didn't think it would get any worse. Certainly not within the time it would take to clear security. I joined the line and started fishing for my passport to present to the checking agent. I felt a thin sheen of sweat break my forehead and underarms, and my features flushed for a moment as a wave of heat rushed over me. I didn't pay it much heed as I was going through the security line, as it caused me great anxiety, and I chalked it up to pre-flight jitters. It was only as I stood face to face with an agent and handed her my passport and a ticket that I had a glimpse of agony that was about to begin. It felt like it rippled for a moment, as if consciousness buckled so intense that the pain fired through my bowels. I grimaced spastically and emitted a low moan. I felt myself take an involuntary step sideways. Stars shot through my head briefly and my vision blurred and then snapped back into focus. The agent was staring at me with slight consideration and asked me if I was all right. I pulled myself together and stood up straight, declared that I was fine, mortified that I had a lapse of decorum, not only in public, but at the security clearance in the airport. As I fumbled my belt through the metal detector, the pain in my stomach increased, and particularly had to sit on the floor to take my shoes off, terrified that what would happen if I had bent at the middle to do it. It was becoming increasingly more evident to me that this wasn't a stomach ache. No, this was something worse. As a child, I had a bout of diarrhea after a trip to Mexico with my family. I remember feeling the nausea that swept through me before my child self had surrendered to the gas pains that parked myself on a toilet for an hour, shitting until I felt like I wouldn't have any bones left. And that was how I was feeling now. Several key differences. The pain was worse. The sense of an impending bowel movement was so formidable, it gave me temporary amnesia, but it took all of my willpower, all of it, to clench my butt cheeks together to prevent my sphincter from exploding. A sudden shock of pain racked my body, and I half wondered if I was going to give birth to a Tasmanian devil, the crazy, fever-induced image of the said cartoon animal chasing Bugs Bunny through the splashy volcanic shit kettle that was my stomach, caused me an illicit, short, mechanical bark of laughter as I approached the metal detector. A wild, distant look in my eyes, sweat now beginning to pour off of my like a long-distance runner in Kenya. The security agent on the other side of the detector shot a quick glance over to her coworker, who narrowed his eyes and made a subtle movement towards his holster. My breathing became uneven as I entered the metal detector, and I realized with alarm that I had taken off my socks without even registering it. And one of my shirt tails was untucked in the front. I held my breath, my eyes bulging dangerously from my head as the machine scanned me. As I shakily moved towards the agent for a pat-down, my stomach began to elicit sounds that could only be described as otherworldly. It started off as a short, bubbling sound heard from afar, and it grew in pitch and intensity at an alarming rate. My jaw dropped in shock as what I can only describe as the sound of an agonized, wailing alley cat in heat, with a persistent Doppler effect added to its voice, emitted from some nether region in my intestines. The officer's eyes widened in alarm. She kept her eyes glued to my stomach as she thoroughly patted me down. As she reached for my shins, I felt my innards suddenly expand and plummet towards my rectum. With cat-like reflexes, I squeezed my sphincter shut with what seemed like nanoseconds to spare. And I knew that if I didn't get to the bathroom immediately, I would shit myself. With a Herculean effort and all the strength that I could muster, I forced my butt cheeks together, knowing that one false move would open the floodgates. I began to walk like a duck, trying to remain as inconspicuous as possible, not even caring what other people were seeing in front of them. A disheveled, barefoot, 40-year-old businessman, red-faced and bulgy-eyed, sweating profusely, shaking slightly, and walking without bending his knees. With a single-minded intensity, I grabbed my carry-on, shoes and socks from the plastic tub that had passed the X-ray inspection, and without putting anything back on, I turned on my heels with the intention of finding the nearest restroom and slowly dying there, one squirt at a time. But that's not what happened. It keeps going. I turned to go find myself staring at three armed agents who stopped me and asked if I would follow them. Why? What's the matter? I stammered, wincing slightly at the act of speech seemed to strain the tenuous and extremely fragile truce I had negotiated between my bowels and the tempest that raged within. I have to go to the bathroom right now, I pleaded. Just follow us, they said, leaving no room for argument. The other travelers, clearing the security check, stared with curiosity and revulsion at the spectacle unfolding before them, whispering amongst themselves and hurrying to pack up their belongings and get far away from me as possible, no doubt assuming that the airport had nabbed some sort of domestic terrorist. If I had been feverishly trying to hold back the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, I likely would have died of shame. With each step I took towards the room they ushered me into, I felt my legs would give way. I marveled at how strong the human will could be, marveled at what was essentially patching a hole in the Hoover Dam with bubble gum could actually be sustained indefinitely. Maybe I would make it through this ordeal after all. The room they brought me to was an examination room. I had pretty much stopped registering the details of my environment as my consciousness closed off all but the absolutely necessary functions, breathing, ability to walk. But I snapped back to reality when I heard the snap of rubber. The slow dawning of realization poked through my agony and stoic resolve as I turned to face an agent donning rubber gloves. Sir, we're going to have to perform a cavity search on you, a young, fresh-faced agent stated in a firm but emotionless voice. His short-cropped blonde hair was immaculate, and for a crazy moment I wondered if he was an actor, and all this was some sort of elaborate practical joke to amuse bored kids watching YouTube. He must have taken my tortured silence for resistance, because he looked at me sharply and he said, "Lower your pants and underwear, please, across the desk."
Oh, jeez. Oh, no.
Panic started to grip me in its icy grasp, and the sudden adrenaline threatened to destroy my sphincter's bulwarks and rend my anus in two. I inhaled sharply with a pained gasp and doubled up my efforts to clench my cheeks together. Sir, please, I begged, differing to this kind act, to this kid in act of desperation. I have to go to the bathroom. You could follow me to the stall if you need, but I need to go badly. I had some bad Haribo sugar-free gummy bears, and now I feel like... But they stopped listening, and they smirked at each other and the other two agents, a tall, dark-haired female and a shorter, balding fat man. They looked at me from what I could see them shaking a little as they stifled their laughs. Sir, face the wall, put your hands on the desk, and spread your cheeks, the young agent stated, a lopsided grin on his face. But I began to protest, and just then a fresh shock of pain forced me to stop and lean on the table for support as an ungodly howling rose from my stomach, something between the dying moans of a woolly mammoth and the sound of bubble wrap popping underwater. I exhaled shakily, and my focus began to narrow as I rallied for the final battle. Shaking uncontrollably and sweat literally raining down onto the tabletop in front of me, I turned to face the wall and heard a meek, childlike voice pleading from somewhere in the room. Please, it said, please. From somewhere within me, my mind recognized that this sound had issued from me. Although my unconsciousness had now begun to separate from my body, and I held my breath and prayed to God for strength. He probably had some heroin or something up there that opened up, the female guard said, as part of me that hadn't escaped into the ether yet acknowledged that she was behind me and to my left. Probably high as a kite. Look at him, she said. The shorter guy agreed with a snort and off to my right. Spread your cheeks, the young agent said, his voice directly behind me, lower than the other two, and bend over. Please God, please God, please God, please God, please God, I whispered in desperate mechanical mantra, not even aware of my surroundings anymore. I felt as if I lost an opium fog with the half-stitched images and sound filtering through to create a nonsensical version of reality. Another volley of pain tore through me, and I involuntarily leaned forward over the desk, my focus completely narrowed now on a spot in the wall 2 feet in front of me, a curious imperfection in what seemed to be whitewashed stone wall. It was a dark blotch about 5 millimeters long and shaped like a smiling bear, a yellow dancing bear, no green bear, no red. It was all the colors of the rainbow. My God, it was beautiful. It took something as simple as a slight breeze to trigger Armageddon. That's all. No trumpets, no fanfare, no fire raining down from the heavens, no dogs and cats living together in harmony, no finger on the button, no prophet to predict it, no, nothing. As I stared at the rainbow bear smiling and dancing in front of me, my mouth agape, drooling, eyes glazed, bloodshot, face coated in a sheen of sweat, and I heard the softest sound, an exhalation from the young agent behind me. And then at the same instant, the warm air of his breath feather across my butt cheeks, just for a moment. Maybe less, maybe a split second, even a nanosecond, I felt the presence of God there with me in that room as neurons began to misfire at a blinding rate. Nerve ending bristled and my muscles twitched reflexively. I stood at the brink with one foot hovering over the edge, and then without even taking a step, I found myself plummeting. With a sound like an extra large plastic ketchup bottle being run over by a Mack truck, my sphincter released. The pressure of the blast pushed me hard against the desk, and the legs of the desk screeched as they scraped across the floor. My body remained rigid for a moment, and I experienced relief that could only be described as an orgasmic in its purity. My eyes rolled in their head, and my tongue lolled out of my head like a half-retarded dog. I emitted a low, sustained groan that grew in pitch as the filthy torrent pushed its way out of my body. Tremors racked my body, and I must have looked like a fish out of water with an endless stream of shit firing out of its ass. Other sounds and sensations started to filter in now as my consciousness began to materialize once more. The muffled scream of a dungeon filled with prisoners near death radiated from my stomach, the rushing sound of liters of liquid trying to escape through an aperture too small to accommodate it. At the same time, an omnipresent sound of chunky liquid spattering against a hard surface with great force. The high-pitched screaming of a woman's voice calling out, "God!" Another voice sobbing uncontrollably. Another voice sobbing uncontrollably, imploring to make it stop in my own ecstatic monotone wail. When my ordeal eventually ran its course, I was left panting for breath and wobbly-legged, half crying, half laughing with relief, barely lucid, and feeling as if I had birthed an elephant. My colon felt like someone had poured chili sauce all over it and then sent a colony of fire ants to eat it. Through my sobs, I heard the sound of dripping, like when the sprinklers are eventually turned off after an office fire or a thunderstorm, when the willow that overhangs a pond continues to rain down long after the sky has stopped. From behind me, the sobbing continued. I heard someone trying to speak into a walkie-talkie, but nonsensical words were all that the man could speak, which sounded like ravings of a lunatic. With great relief, I slowly pulled myself off the table, legs trembling. My stomach elicited one last sound, a loud, prolonged gasp bubbling from that eerily resembled pig orgasm. I slowly turned my head to survey the devastation, and in that instant, if I had a pencil or other sharp object, I would have gouged my eyes out with revulsion. And the smell was enough to drive a man insane. It was a stench of rotting potatoes mixed with sulfur and ammonia, cooked in a broth of chicken feces, and left to age for 2 weeks in a yeasty stew at the bottom of a friend's house. After half a whiff of this ghoulish brine, I immediately stopped breathing through my nose. But the taste was to remain in the back of my throat for months to come. The young agent that had taken the brunt of the foul witch's brew, and at first I couldn't process what I was seeing. I thought somehow the young blonde kid had been spirited away and replaced it with the brown golem, or an ATV rider that had spent the better part of a day driving through every mud puddle he could find after a torrential downpour. With some degree of compartmentalization, I came to understand that was for some unfathomable reason that this kid hadn't moved, or hadn't been able to move, through the entire fecal deluge. He had weathered the entire assault head-on, like some sort of hero from Greek mythology. I had given this poor schmuck a one-man shit bukkake, and that would make a Brazilian pornographer retch with disgust. Like, I just love these lines that this guy writes. And he was still in the same position he must have been from the moment of first impact. I tried to comprehend how he must be feeling, what he must be going through psychologically, but it came evident very quickly that he had become very broken. No doubt forced so deeply within himself, once the fire hose has been turned on, that there was no hope for him ever coming back from it. Certainly not without extensive psychotherapy or lobotomy. I looked beyond his quivering, catatonic, crouched form to see a perfect outline of him cut out on the white wall behind him. Either side filled with a dripping, opaque layer of an alternatively pulpy and runny fecal stew. I noticed 2 quivering masses at either extremes of the room and realized they were humanoid in form. Although the counterwelling that was coming from these broken creatures was just blubbering gibberish, and that was the tableau that was burnt in my mind's eye for eternity. Needless to say, I missed my flight. In fact, the next week was a blur. I have vague recollections of an army of hazmat-clad features looming through the brown landscape of the soiled room, and slopping sounds of rubber boots squelching in puddles of a fetid, detritus, uncontrollable wailing and animal-like sounds issuing from the mouths of the creatures that had been traumatized beyond their capacity for being put back together. The complete loss of sensation from my waist down as I rolled through the room on a waterproof gurney, its wheels struggling to surf on top of the shit-soaked floor. I spent a week or so in the hospital enclosed in a well-ventilated, sealed room, with a suited doctor coming in on the hour to monitor my vital signs as they tried to rehydrate my body. I had apparently expelled every available drop of water from my body that was possible to sustain life for a short period of time. All of my clothes were incinerated in the hospital's crematorium, and the soiled bag of Haribo sugar-free gummy bears was never recovered. This is my story. It is inconceivable to think that this kind of product can be sold legally and misrepresented as food. I was lucky. I survived. But as for the families of the survivors and the survivors themselves, they will forever live with the trauma of the events that took place at Pearson International Airport on that snowy day in April 2013.
Oh, God.
That gives new meaning to a shitty story.
Yeah.
Oh, God. I liked how the story just turned around. I thought he was going to be commenting on how terrible the gummy bear is. Because it's a review.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a review of his day from hell. Jeez.
First question, how did you discover this? Where did you find it?
Yeah, how did you find this? What kind of free time do you have?
Somebody showed it to me a while ago, actually, and I had forgot about it until now. Yeah.
Okay.
This guy deserves an award.
How I did it. Yeah, it does.
He should write he's got to publish like a short story or something.
Yeah.
Great writer.
So I mentioned off the top that this is like a fun game to challenge your friends. So the game goes as follows. You find a hilarious review, and then you get your friend to read it right off the top. I had read that before, so I was able to make it through because I knew what was happening. But sometimes when you read these things, they're hard at first read. So I'm going to challenge Mike here to read this next one that I'm sending to him. And you just have to read it off the cuff. The same candy, so we don't have to do a whole backstory on it. Not as long, but still really, really good story.
Yeah. Same guy?
No, this is a different guy. This guy's name is Luke.
Okay.
Just Luke. He has a one name kind of thing, like Cher or Madonna.
He's like Ronaldo.
This could be a movie. Like the whole story could be a movie.
It would be interesting, like, you know how they have like true crime things or like people tell their tales about like ghost stories or something like that, but you instead of like a ghost story, it's like they're like it's something like this where just some horrible story that happened to them.
Man.
I'm in. Should
All right.
we start reading?
Yeah, so yeah, take it away, Mike.
Okay, so this is a customer review from Luke, who gave 1 star out of 5 on Amazon. Title of the review is "See You in Hell, Haribo Sugar-Free Gummy Bears." By the way, while you were reading that, Alex, I was Googling what these things are, and I do remember these things when I was a kid.
Yeah.
They were okay. Anyway, back to this particular review. The flavor name is Gold Bears. It was my last class of the semester, and the final exam was worth 30% of our grade. After a late-night study session, I felt confident, but I had to decide between sleeping in or cooking breakfast. My eyelids chose sleep. My stomach later regretted this decision, and after several uncomfortable stomach growls, I finally decided to make a quick stop by the campus bookstore and grab a snack before my test. Since the semester was ending and everyone was going home for the summer, a lot of items were on sale, including the snacks and candy that they kept up front. Being in the hungry state that I was in, it felt only logical to pick the largest yet least expensive candy in order to get more bang for my buck. And there they sat, 2 bags of Haribo sugar-free gummy bears. But buy one, get one free. What a deal, I thought naively. I would eat 1 bag before my test and 1 bag afterwards. As I walked to class, I gleefully chewed on those abominable little bastards, unaware of utter mayhem that they would soon unleash upon my poor, poor anus. I sat down at my desk as the professor informed us that, due to issues with cheating in the past, restroom breaks would be prohibited until the completion of the exam. I'll give you 10 minutes to use the restroom now. This will be your last chance. Any takers? The demon bears hadn't released their unholy necromancy upon my stomach yet. So in my moment of ignorant foolishness, I remained seated, still munching on those miniature bear-shaped bombs. After the student wise enough to take the professor's offer had returned, the professor handed out the test. I was 6 questions in when it happened. It started subtly at first, almost like a slight tingly sensation in my lower abdomen. I thought nothing of it, assuming my intestines were just doing their thing. Little did I know that my intestines were trying desperately to warn me of the horror that was on the horizon. By question 9, it happened again. But this time, it was followed by a sharp pain, as if those infernal hellions had orchestrated an attack upon my colon. I fought to contain a groan that tried escaping my lips. It was at this point I began to panic. Something was going horribly wrong, and I needed to get through this test before it got any worse. By question 14, my worst fear was upon me. The Satan Bear's burning, hot, liquidy, dark magic crashed against my anal sphincter like a tidal wave. I was able to close the hatch just in time, but those relentless, toxic bears beat against it like orcs breaking down the doors of Helm's Deep. I knew I wouldn't be able to do so much as shift in my seat without risking a breach. I kept fighting through my exam, clenching my cheeks with all my might. Beads of sweat began rolling down my neck. Suddenly a loud, gurgling war cry came from my belly, and the entire class lifted their heads. At this point, nothing mattered except expelling this ungodly presence from my bowels. With 15 questions left, I promptly wrote C for every... I promptly wrote... I just have the giggles now. I promptly wrote C for every answer and ran out of the classroom. My professor yelled something, but I was too preoccupied with the volcanic eruption that needed to take place before I could find sweet relief. I burst into the restroom like the Kool-Aid Man, and behold, the handicap stall was empty. Sun rays from the adjacent window shone upon it, as if it were a gift from God himself. It took me less than 0.5 seconds to undo my belt buckle, pull down my pants, and finally relax my weary buttocks upon the toilet seat. It took absolutely no effort to expel this demon. Almost immediately, the floodgates of hell were opened, and the damned, liquefied souls of an entire bag's worth of gummy bears cried as they burned through my sphincter and into the watery abyss below. I had never felt such simultaneous relief and anguish in my life. After 30 more minutes of this, I immediately went home, dug a hole in my backyard, and burned the remaining bag of gummy bears. I leave with this. Do not, I repeat, do not eat these spawns of Satan. Not only did they cause me to fail my final test, but the anguish I experienced is something I wouldn't wish upon anyone, not even my worst enemy. The only place these godforsaken hell bears belong are buried deep below the Earth's surface. 25,029 people found this helpful. Well then.
I guess legally we have to state that this is opinion from somebody else. This does not reflect our opinion. We're just reading it.
Right.
Probably for the best.
I'm thinking the reason why this is happening is perhaps maybe gummy bears had expired.
Yeah.
Maybe they need to read expiration labels.
Or
yeah.
someone probably laced it
Could
with
be.
some something.
Someone at the factory is lacing gummy bears with X-Lax.
It's a bad batch.
It is possible.
It was a recall.
God.
Maybe. Some disgruntled employee.
Maybe that's what it is.
It's got to be a recall
Yeah.
on these things.
Because that review was from 2015, so how long do gummy bears last? I don't know.
Good question.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Oh,
that was a good
man.
laugh.
You don't want this to happen.
It's a fun
again,
challenge,
And this can
just-
happen to anyone.
Yeah.
This is traumatizing. We've all been there where like you're in public and you're not
Yeah.
feeling so hot. But I've never had, Satan come out of my sphincter in the middle of a class or something.
Yeah.
I think the worst place for this to happen is at the airport. I feel so bad for this guy.
Oh,
I want to find
so
that
bad.
that article, though.
Trauma. Yeah, I wonder if this made the news.
I'm
You said it
surprised
was in the
you
Toronto
can go
Star,
to jail.
April 2013.
You know you can go to jail for
You
stuff like
can't.
that,
Like,
right?
For what?
I
I mean,
he
they
was
would-
just he
They
just had
would
a stomach
handcuff
illness.
you, take you to jail, saying you took something. Because people, like, swallow
they could.
crazy things for, transportation, like coke, cocaine, or whatever. Put it in, swallow it, get to your point, take it out, and sell it.
I think they would. Yeah, like they would take. Yeah, maybe they could take him to jail, but they would just do a drug test and they'll see. There's nothing there, just the flu, stomach flu, food poisoning. Yep, it's what you call shit disturbing.
Yeah.
The puns are strong.
Yeah, we probably should start off with like a warning. Yeah.
Literally shit disturbing. All right.
That was good. That was good.
With that, follow us on the social medias.
Yeah. And
Podcast.
watch what you
remember,
buy
kids.
from. Remember, kids. Watch what you buy from a vending machine.
Yeah. Keep your shit together.
Yeah, keep your shit together. Yeah.
Okay. That was a fun episode.